Hello, I'm here today to tell you about a great book, West with the Night by Beryl Markham. It's a fascinating book. It's a memoir, an adventure memoir of a woman aviatrix flyer in Kenya, 1920s, 1930s, about her growing up there in the country and also being a horse trainer for racehorses. So her life is divided into, well, more lives than probably most people have, and so they're divided in, the book itself is divided into 4 books, which roughly tell different parts of the adventure of her life. And one of the last ones, it deals with her probably biggest claim to fame, which is being the first person to fly solo across the Atlantic from east to west, starting off in London and landing in Nova Scotia. And so that particular chapter is called West with the Night, and that then became the chapter for the book. But actually it's not a particularly descriptive one, because most of the book is set firmly in Africa with her love of the country. The book, when it came out, was published in 1942, so it was war times and it didn't get quite the recognition and popularity it deserved. A contemporary of hers in Kenya was Karen Blixen, who obviously wrote Out of Africa. It was published, and it was published before the war, and it tended to get more critical acclaim, publicity, and of course it became a very, very well-known film. But there's a crossover, and in fact the introduction is written by Martha Gellhorn, a very experienced war journalist, and she reckons that Out of Africa should be read as a companion to West with the Night, because there's a lot of coverage that's similar. In fact, in this book, one of her recurring clients for her work as a pilot is Count von Blixen, who's married to Karen Blixen. This is a book to read if you like a gutsy woman doing things in an intrepid kind of way, and with a great love of animals as well. If you love animals, you will find a very understanding and kind heart towards camaraderie with horses and dogs especially, without being sentimental. If you're a writer, in chapter 9, where she writes about a very proud horse arriving new to the stables and her going to meet him, and then she flips it and starts to tell it from the point of view of the horse. It is fabulous, a tour de force, something to read from looking at points of view. Great example. Some of the writing style that attracted me I can find in the wry humour. So for example, at the start of chapter 18, the only disadvantage in surviving a dangerous experience lies in the fact that your story of it tends to be anticlimactic. You can never carry on right through the point where whatever it is that threatens your life actually takes it, and to get anybody to believe you. The world is full of skeptics. Another thing I liked was she used a kind of literary analogy when she was describing the kind of guests that would gather around a couple's table. And this couple were very hospitable, especially towards pilots. They had their own runway, they had their own plane, and if you needed to get from A to B and you needed to stop over, they were very welcoming. And here's the reference. June Carberry, small, nimble-minded and attractive, presided over evenings at Saramai like a gracious pixie over a company of characters snatched from an unfinished novel, originally drafted by H. Rider Haggard and written by Scott Fitzgerald, with James M. Cain looking over his shoulder. So you've got a whole mix there of hard-boiled and adventure writing all mixed in together. It gives you a nice sense of who was there and how kind of rough and ready, and the kind of topics they talked about, which were of course hunting and so forth. Then it came out again where it was rediscovered by someone who looked at Hemingway praising this writer and thought, who's this writer, who's this book? And it got republished in the 80s by Virago Press. I love her description. She talks about her dad and she says he came out of Sandhurst with such a ponderous knowledge of Greek and Latin that it would have submerged a lesser man. He never let his education get the better of him. So her dad is really well read as well, and now and again she'll mention things and you think, oh, that's relating to a little bit of Shakespeare, but it's not coded, it's not made explicit. Most of the book is actually set in Africa, and it's about Africa, and there is a quote from Shakespeare right at the very start of the book, even before the title page. Henry IV, Act 5, Scene 3. I speak of Africa and golden joys. Because it's written 1920s, 1930s Kenya, her father is English and runs a farm. Some people may be concerned about colonial influences, and I would just recommend to read the book. I would just say read the book for the viewpoint of a woman in a particular place at a particular time. And if you're reading with a view to colonialism, obviously you want to get the full spectrum of opinions, and I think hers is well written, worth hearing, and there's a love of the land and an understanding of the people of the land and their ways, as well as just her own experience being in the place. So I would warmly encourage you to read this book. I enjoyed reading it, and I think you probably will too.